Micaela Cronin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Claudia.
In your report, you've recommended a national watchdog to coordinate and track government progress on tackling domestic, sexual and family violence. How do you see a body like that operating?
Claudia, I think there are two things that we've talked about in the report. One is about the Commission's role and what our role is to monitor and hold government accountable for the delivery of the outcomes that every government has committed to in the National Plan. And what we need to do to strengthen our capacity to do that. The other thing we've talked about is about a national body to drive implementation. It's more about the capacity to coordinate what is an incredibly complex mix of systems that are all contributing to solving domestic, family and sexual violence across 8 jurisdictions, multiple portfolios. Those efforts need to be coordinated in a much clearer and more focused way than they are right now.
And what are some of the glaring problems in terms of coordination? What stands out to you as some of the issues there?
Look, we've seen multiple inquiries and royal commissions and coronial inquests talk about the need for harmonisation across jurisdictions, for the harm that is done when different systems don't collaborate and share information. So information sharing is a really critical gap. We have issues when we've got different definitions of domestic, family and sexual violence across different systems, whether that's child protection systems, family law systems, policing. Those systems need to be working and talking together more. We also, there's work underway. It was one of the recommendations from the rapid review about where government systems are actually being weaponised and where those systems need to coordinate better to ensure that they are keeping the people who need to be kept safe, who are the users of those systems.
And just on those reports and reviews and coronial inquests that you just mentioned, because there is a section, as you say, in this report that looks at thousands of recommendations from all of those inquiries dating all the way back to 2010. And you mentioned how many of them are repeated over and over again, but many of them also not widely or consistently implemented. How concerned are you that the recommendations that you've made in this report are going to go the same way?
Look, I'm really hopeful that we have built towards a moment where we are seeing very significant commitment from government. We saw last year 2 national cabinets, and we saw the Prime Minister and National Cabinet make domestic, family and sexual violence one of the 6 top priorities for the National Cabinet, and announced the rapid review, and that the rapid review recommendations all governments are working towards reporting back to National Cabinet by the end of this year. So we've got a National Women's and Women's Safety Ministers Council who have been tasked with leadership around those recommendations. I think that, you've always got to balance the fact that getting 8 jurisdictions to be focused on implementing, as you've said, thousands of recommendations with pretty significant consistency across what the themes are, that there will be issues around that. One of the recommendations we've made is that there needs to be a national body that really drives that implementation.
You've also recommended that all governments focus on preventing and responding to child sexual exploitation as part of this report. Earlier this week, Four Corners revealed that pedophiles have infiltrated Australia's childcare system. It's obviously an incredibly disturbing story. Some parents' groups have called for a national childcare regulator to help respond to that. What do you make of that call?
Look, it's deeply distressing for all of us to hear about the level of organised child exploitation that is going on in our childcare systems. And I am really very grateful for the very good investigative journalism that has surfaced that, and also very aware of and appreciative of the people who have stood up and are telling their stories, the families who are advocating for change and really wanting to make the system a safer place for our children. So that's the first thing I would say, is we really need to recognise. I'm not surprised. I think one of the things that we need to recognise is that where there are vulnerable children, where there are vulnerable people who want to cause harm will actually weaponise and use those systems. I think that we absolutely are looking at what needs to happen to make childcare centres safe for children. Children should be families should be able to be confident that their children are safe in those centres. I think that there absolutely needs to be greater regulation, greater investment. We have seen that in other systems where we know that children were vulnerable. The Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse really examined a number of those other institutions. We haven't had the same level of attention and investment in the childcare system, and we need to see that.
Do you think there could be a benefit to a Royal Commission into the childcare system?
I think that Royal Commissions play an incredibly important role in shining a light where there hasn't been a great deal of attention. I think that we know a lot about what is going on in childcare systems. What we need to see is action.
Obviously, childcare is a matter for the federal government, but it's also a matter for the states. And you've highlighted in this report that coordination across those jurisdictions has frankly not really been up to scratch. Does it concern you that that could happen with childcare? Is that something that worries you?
It's something that I am deeply focused on. How do we improve coordination and collaboration across all jurisdictions and the Commonwealth's efforts? And it's why one of our recommendations is that there needs to be a national coordinating body. I think that it is something that in a federation we really struggle to bring that harmonisation across jurisdictions. I am very confident that there is very strong attention on how to fix the issue in childcare centres, and that we really need to see action about improving that.
Other recommendations that you've made regarding sexual violence. The ABC heard from hundreds of former learner drivers who say that they were sexually harassed and assaulted, most of them while they were still minors, while they were learning to drive. The Greens, the opposition and a number of crossbenchers have called for a nationally coordinated response to that issue. Is that something you would like to see?
Wherever women and children, wherever people, vulnerable people, are exposed to situations where they are likely to be unsafe, we need to get better at thinking through using safety by design principles. So absolutely we need to be thinking about those horrific stories that we have heard, and that will be continuing, I'm sure, of what's happening when young learner drivers are in very vulnerable positions with instructors, and there have been some really good recommendations about what could make those people feel safer. And I think listening to the voices of people with lived experience, listening to those young people about what would have made them feel safer, is a really critical step in that. So it's one of the things that we strongly advocate for, is listen to people who are the closest and really understand what the problems are, people with their own lived experience, children, young people, families who say, this is what happened to me and this is what would have made a difference and made me safer.
A number of learners told the ABC that they wanted to see dash cams in cars. Is that the sort of thing that would fit under the safety by design principles that you just mentioned?
Yes, it is. Safety by design principles really come from the work of the Safety Commissioner and thinking about tech facilitated abuse and the banking industry, but it can relate to anything that we think about in terms of a system where someone can be exposed to abuse and harm. The three principles of safety by design are the responsibility of the business or the company or the agency for a service to think through what their responsibility is to keep people safe. The second principle is around agency and empowerment of the users of that system, so thinking about people who are learner drivers and what it is that would make them safe. And the third principle is around transparency and reporting. So what has brought these things to light, whether it's childcare agencies or whether it's the learner driver example, is the stories of those people who have experienced harm in them. So transparency around those situations is what will contribute to keeping the community safe.
You mentioned the rapid review a little bit earlier. That's over a year now since you handed down that report. You helped steer that review. One of the recommendations that you made was for the federal government to implement a ban on gambling advertising. Are you disappointed that that hasn't happened yet, and are you still hopeful that it could?
So I'm always hopeful, Claudia, and I think that's one of the things that's really important in this role, is to just keep on reminding all of our leaders and decision makers about the things that will really make a difference in people's lives. Gambling, alcohol reform, I think, are two things that we know the evidence very clearly tells us we can do more that will keep people safe.
Micaela Cronin, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Claudia.